Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
Hello and welcome to this week's programme. We've got some good items again on this week's programme. You were at the launch of the Provenance label and the stamps with a very special guest and famous fella from one of my favourite childhood programmes, Blue Peter.
That's right. Chris Collins was a very exciting person to speak with, and the children absolutely loved him when he went to speak to them at Peel Cloth Workers School. And what a great message he was putting across also, to grow homegrown vegetables, how to plant things, and an importance of agriculture and horticulture in our places where we live.
Yeah, and them stamps that were launched, and Nicola Dixon done a fabulous job designing them, didn't she?
She's absolutely wonderful. The colours that she used in the stamps were so vibrant, and the children loved them when they were going around the schools. It's just such a great idea, celebrating everything that's Manx.
Yeah, and the Food Provenance label's been launched.
A very important issue here on the Isle of Man. It's nice now that people can trust a symbol that represents everything that is Manx, and the ingredients are 100% Manx, and you know exactly where your food has come from.
Yeah, and you spoke to some of the people, including the Minister, Howard Quayle, the Chief Minister. I caught up with the Minister for DEFA, Geoffrey Boot, had a good conversation with him about the Provenance launch of the labels, and also a management committee that's been set up to amalgamate, in a way, the Queen and King scallop fishing industry on the Isle of Man, and also had a chat with him about his recent trip to the Channel Islands.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, it's been another busy and exciting time for the promotion of Manx produce, Kerry, hasn't it?
It certainly has. The new development with the Provenance label has finally come to the fore, and I went along to the Bath and Bottle for its launch and caught up with some of the people in attendance.
Chief Minister, this has been something very close to your heart here today at Bath and Bottle, the Provenance label.
It certainly is. I know back in 2004 we set up a meeting and a committee in the Manx National Farmers Union, and we founded the I Love Manx campaign to try and raise the awareness of the excellent produce that we have on the Isle of Man. People like John Kennick was on the committee, myself and a number of others, and I'm just delighted to see what a professional, slick marketing tool it's become now. It really has moved on, and real credit to everyone, but it's really important that when you set up a fantastic marketing product, that people know that when they buy it, that they're really getting a Manx product. It's not something that's been imported and sold under the Manx, the good Manx name. So I'm delighted we've got a Provenance label.
And also, being a farmer previous to your position now, you know how hard these people work to get this produce to the fore.
I do, and I think it's been disgraceful when you hear sometimes of a product being sold as non-Manx, when you know the hard work that people have put in. The margins are tight, they're not making a fortune, and therefore this hard work that they've done and the product that they've produced should be protected, and I'm absolutely delighted that we've managed to achieve that under, I suppose, my watch as Chief Minister.
Andrew Lees, it's been a very successful afternoon here at Bath and Bottle for the Provenance label launch.
It certainly has. I mean, it's over a year's worth of work has gone forward in terms of the Provenance label, talking to the producers, talking to the consumers to get actually the final label looked at. We've taken all the feedback, and hopefully we've got a label that sort of celebrates the provenance of Isle of Man.
The label's obviously very important. It's to show that the product is made in the Isle of Man, it's produced in the Isle of Man, the ingredients.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there are two. There's product of, which basically the products are sort of grown, reared and processed on the Isle of Man. You know, so you're talking meat, you're talking dairy. We're also talking in terms of things such as honey. You've got to have 100% Manx honey to qualify the label. And then we've got made in, and the made in is around that if it's been processed on the Isle of Man. You know, we talk about things such as coffee. We can't grow coffee on the Isle of Man, but if you process coffee on the Isle of Man and package it, then you can use the made in label as well. So we're trying to have a clear distinction between both sets of products, and both sets of products being produced on the Isle of Man, not across, not anywhere else in the world, but on this Isle of Man.
This is a symbol that consumers can trust.
Yes, absolutely. There's a symbol. We have a set of rules. The rules have been gone through, trying to break the rules to see if we can, and we're confident that with the label that's been launched today can be trusted. And we want feedback. If people are misusing the label, then let us know, because the whole thing around this is a trust. This has got to be a credible scheme, and it's got to be a trustworthy scheme that the consumer trusts that label and that product is actually Manx.
Because it's a big thing now. People need reassurance about food miles, traceability of the produce, the meat, the dairy. This is essential nowadays.
It absolutely is. People want to know where their food has come from. They want to know how it's been reared, how it's been grown, how it's been looked after. And it's more and more important now with regards to the food miles that at least we have something we can actually say this has been produced on the Isle of Man. It's come within 10, 20 miles of where you're probably buying it. You'll probably be able to tell who's actually produced it as well.
There's an ever-increasing range of produce, as the new food guide says today.
Yeah, I mean, the new food guide has gone from 59. It's now, it's doubled in the 6th edition, and it continues to go more and more and more. It says there are more and more products coming through. I mean, even this week we're talking to businesses that are launching brand new products which we haven't seen on the Isle of Man before.
Well, there's such an incentive to do it. The Countryfile just recently declared the Isle of Man as a foodie destination. This is a lovely thing to have for the island.
It absolutely is. I mean, it is becoming a foodie destination. Only when you start sort of questioning what's actually available do you see how wide a range. You can get a full Christmas dinner. You can get a full Sunday lunch. I mean, there's nothing we produce that you can't actually get here.
So now customers can go into many shops now and see this symbol. It'll stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, over the next year or so, the label will actually become more and more products. Part of what we don't want to do is to actually say everybody gets rid of the packaging and puts a new label on. That's not environmentally friendly. We have a website which is IOM Food and Drink where you'll have a definitive list of products that are our Manx, and over time as producers change the packaging, the label goes on.
That was Andrew Lees, the Food Development Officer from DEFA, and Chief Minister Howard Quayle.
And staying on the subject of the food provenance label, I caught up with the Minister for DEFA, Geoffrey Boot.
It's gone through a lot of research and trial with third parties, interested parties, to make sure that we get a label that is uniquely identifiable with the Isle of Man. I think we've achieved that, but bearing in mind it's got to be very small, sits on packaging, and there's competition for space on packaging. I think it will achieve that. And we're doing a lot of good stuff on the Isle of Man with our food, the Isle of Man creameries, our grass-fed cattle, sheep with good provenance, disease-free. So we're building on that with this provenance label so that people will know what they're buying is actually produced on the Isle of Man.
Is it one of these ways of sort of getting rid of the 3 legs of man, but then the little print saying produce from Mozambique?
Well, I'm hoping that the little provenance label, which we can't show on radio for obvious reasons, but I think listeners will probably see it very shortly in the newspaper. It brands the island with an Isle of Man picture of the Isle of Man, and it is specifically identifiable to the Isle of Man. And I think it's a good compromise in design, size, and what we're trying to achieve.
So it's all going forward, I suppose, because it has been a hot topic for a few years there, hasn't it?
Well, yes, it's part of the food strategy. We're trying to increase the GDP from the food sector, and we're driving it in a number of ways. Small business development, and we have a dedicated officer dealing with that, as well as trying to maintain the sector as a whole. And in due course, there will be more discussion over the future of the meat plant. The PIN process is complete. We've had a considerable amount of interest. We're shortly going out to formal tender, and the meat plant is an integral part of maintaining a sustainable and viable agricultural sector on the island.
Minister for DEFA Geoffrey Boot talking about the Isle of Man provenance label to promote the Manx produce. And it wasn't the only thing that's been launched this week, Kiri.
No, that's right. The Isle of Man Post Office have launched a range of Green Man stamps, which have been designed by Nicola Dixon, an artist from Peel. And it was to celebrate everything to do with horticulture, farming and fishing heritage here on the Isle of Man. They were officially launched by former head gardener of Blue Peter, Chris Collins, who also attended some of the island's primary schools while he was here.
To be honest with you, it all kind of happened by accident, because I left home very early, not long after my 16th birthday, and I came to the point where I thought I better do something. And I went to the careers office like you did back then, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And really, the only thing I had in my mind is I wanted to work outside, because I was never very good in class. I was one of them fidgety kids. I wanted to be up trees and stuff. And they gave me an apprentice gardener interview, basically. I applied for it, and I became an apprentice gardener with Brighton Parks. And in those days, that was the real prestigious place to be, because a lot of the old boys that are now unfortunately retired, I mean, they just knew the subject. I've never met gardeners as good as those since, to be honest with you. So I was very lucky to do a 5-year apprenticeship with them. And then I was even more lucky to gain a place at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, which is really like only 14 places a year, very prestigious. And I had a really incredible 3 years there, and that kind of really opened the door People think gardeners just dig holes for a living and cut the grass. They have no idea. While I was there, I did a dissertation on this is a mouthful, a Limbey Botanic Garden Genetic and Conservation Programme. And that was in Limbey Botanic Garden is in Cameroon. It's the oldest botanic garden in Cameroon. There's a big rainforest conservation there. So I went out and did that for 6 weeks. And at the end of my Edinburgh course, they offered me a 12-month contract. So I spent 12 months in Africa doing rainforest inventory work, renovating the oldest garden and living with lots of chimpanzees. I lived with 12 chimpanzees at one point and a baby gorilla. That 3 years at Edinburgh and the Africa thing really opened up. And I came back to the UK and I was sitting in my local in Edinburgh and someone came in with a copy of The Scotsman and there was a little advert and it said gardener wanted in Japan. So I put a CV in and... Yeah, 6 weeks later, I was sitting on an aeroplane going to Tokyo, and I was 5 years in Tokyo building gardens on balconies and roofs and teaching a lot of English gardening as well, import-export English goods, and so that was a real mind blower. Yeah, I think I was the first. 3 of us went. We were the first British gardeners to get visas, and the other 2 didn't last long. It's so culturally different. A funny story actually is they call you gaijin if you're Japanese, which means like alien. And I worked in a shop with just me and 500 Japanese. I didn't know what was going on at all. And after 8 weeks, they were calling me Henna gaijin, which means strange alien. So I'd actually doubled it up, and my eccentricity rose to the surface. So I came back from there after 5 years. I went to Kew Botanic Gardens for a while. Then I went to head gardener of Westminster Abbey, which was a really amazing job. And then I got offered a TV series in early 2000s called The Plantsman on BBC Two. One thing led to another, and I got the Blue Peter gig, and I did that for 10 years. So I was on screen for 10 years, and I do lots of other media stuff. I made a big documentary for BBC 4 last year. I do bits and bobs. I'm head of Hort for Garden Organic. I've got lots of fingers in pies now, yeah.
Well, you really, really enjoy it, and you're so passionate. Here at Peel Clothworkers School today, you know, the children absolutely love this little bit of gardening that you did with them.
I think that everybody's a gardener underneath, you know. We did it for thousands. You're a farmer, you know this. Gardeners and farmers, that's what we were for all the time. It's only been the last 30 years we've been buying everything out of shops. And it's important we get our kids to realise where our food is sourced and why it's there and how it's grown. And that is, I think, an adult obligation, really. Yeah. And I just think that when you just make it fun like we did today, and you can't make passion up, I love it, and that infects the kids. And hopefully this is something they remember, you know. This is something when they're older, they all remember that day gardening and they want to do it with their kids. And so we're just trying to spread the message, really.
And also you brought into maths and biology. You don't always like sitting in a classroom learning it. Well, you brought it into the garden today.
Yeah, well, I didn't like sitting in a classroom, certainly. You know, when I was in a classroom, say in maths, I struggled to follow it because I'd get fidgety and bored, and I think that happens to a lot of kids. And so some kids are naturally academic. They can sit in a classroom, regurgitate information and pass exams. Other kids are not. They need practical learning. So by going out into a garden, measuring a bed, planting plants along measuring runner beans as they grow, looking at insect life, doing biology. I talked a little bit about science in that lesson about stomata and vascular bundles. But if you speak about it in the terms of a plant, it's a lot easier to understand because the kids have different intellect and you need to accommodate that, I think. Gardening's a great way to do that.
And you also touched on you don't have to have a big garden. You can have a window box or an old fish tank to make a rainforest. It was fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that if you watch it on the telly, you see some guy in his 2 acres potting around, and I think that gives the false impression. In London, for example, there's 10 million people, half of them don't have gardens, they just have balconies. Or schools, which should be community hubs. It's important that they garden in schools, parents get involved because it's a way of us all talking to each other. Look at it this way, gardening is like a social adhesive. It's a way for us to come together and communicate, and that's really underpins the whole thing as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think Britain and the Isle of Man are doing more to help young children get involved and learn about where their produce comes from?
I think we're on the road, very much so, compared to when I started 10, 12 years ago. There were very few gardens in primary schools, and now that pretty much they're in all primary schools. That's not just down to me, I will add, but yeah, you know, that I just watching the progress. We got right up into the top when the food school plan was discussed and put in by politicians. When the politicians start listening to you, you know you're getting taken seriously. So we are progressing. I think the big frontier now is secondary schools and trying to get people to do it as a career, both in farming and horticulture. I think we need people to learn. To me, I would argue being able to grow a crop is a life skill, and I think all kids should know that.
Axel, what did you find fascinating here today with Chris Collins?
That we made a bug hotel and it was funny.
And you were in the garden also, and you were turning the earth over and taking the weeds out. What did you plant today?
Some ready beans.
Runner beans.
Runner beans. And some other things.
And Sophie, you were also helping today. You put up a string line and you planted some lettuce.
My favourite part is how he was showing us what we could do in gardens and how we could make it look really nice and how you can help the earth.
And what did you enjoy best?
The bug hotel.
And did you see any creepy crawlies when you were doing the garden work today?
A bee and a worm.
What was your favourite part today?
Making the string.
And what did you have to hold up here today? What were the boards?
Stamps.
Which was your favourite stamp?
The dairy one.
And what was so special about these stamps? Did you know who the artist was?
Nicola Dixon.
And do you know where she lives?
I think she lives in Peel.
That's it. Very special to the school. She just lives down the road. Did you enjoy it, George?
Yes, I did. I just enjoyed all of it.
And what did you think about the stamps?
Yes, they were very nice and they showed the agriculture very, very well.
So did you all enjoy it today, guys?
Yeah!
That was former head gardener of Blue Peter and some of the children from Peel Clothworkers School.
But it really is a good promotion, though, isn't it? And the Isle of Man have been so proud. I can't say philatelists, but the stamps on the Isle of Man are so unique and very, very sought after by stamp collectors as well.
They really are, and this range in particular are emphasising everything that's Manx, the colours that are used, the scenery that's on the stamps is absolutely beautiful. The artist Nicola Dixon has definitely captured the island's beauty.
And she certainly has, and of course them stamps will be available, so go and use them and get a set to keep. I got a set, I think, from a first day cover from the early 70s.
Wow.
No, I better not talk about them then.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, while I was talking to the Minister for DEFA, Geoffrey Boot, I asked him more about the committee that's set up linking the Queen Scallop and the King Scallops together.
There was a board, the Queen Scallop Board, that's been in existence for some time, but this year particularly, or the last fishing season for King Scallops, highlighted the need for a combined board that looked for King Scallops and Queen Scallops, and as they occupy the same territory in terms of seabed, and many of the fishermen that fish for Queen Scallops fish for King Scallops, and the processes are the same, it seems sensible to have a combined board.
In the past, I think over recent times, you've been keeping a close eye since you've got the ministerial job with DEFA, and of course the fishery is a big part of it. And there was a bit of negotiation, I would say, with the Scottish over other incidents, was there?
Well, I wouldn't call them incidents. The start of the King Scallop season saw a lot of boats come in during the fine weather, and in the first 6 days we caught over a quarter of the whole catch for the previous season. Now
what was that down to?
Well, it could be down to a number of factors. First of all, good weather and a lot of fishing going on. Fishing is becoming more accurate with GPS. They follow tracks, so they fish the whole of the seabed rather than just randomly. And it could also be that the stocks are higher, and I think there may have been a combination of the two. However, that was a worry because in sustainability terms, without proper scientific evidence, we were very concerned that the King Scallops were going to be overfished, and we only have to look at what happened in 2013 with the crash in Queen Scallops to see what can happen if overfishing takes place.
It's been a big part of the fishery side of DEFA on the Isle of Man, in conjunction with the marine side of things, to keep a close eye on the Isle of Man's coastal waters, particularly for fishing. Is that the case that it's one of the best?
Well, if you're saying, do we have one of the best fisheries? Well, for King Scallops and Queen Scallops, we have a good fishery, but there are other fisheries outside of our territorial waters. But I think the important thing is that the Isle of Man is a small island. We have a 3-mile territorial limit, which is our own water, and we can do what we like with. And in fact, we've done very well with that in terms of conservation zones. But the 3 to 12-mile limit, we have access by other jurisdictions' boats, and we need to manage that. We need to keep a careful eye on it because it would be very easy to overfish the areas that we have.
Now, this new committee, the Queen and the King Scallop one, getting a few experienced people from not just the Isle of Man waters involved.
We are indeed. The idea of the board is that it is inclusive and seem to be multi-jurisdictional. The new chair, Dr. Crozier, is from Northern Ireland, and he comes with good pedigree from the Northern Irish side. He has good cross-jurisdictional credibility and has committed to work in an open fashion with both producers and processors and all jurisdictions. So I think we're getting on board someone with a lot of experience that will be very useful to us. But in addition to that, we're replacing some of the old members with newer members with some Queen and King Scallop experience, but they are not all from within the Isle of Man. We need to be seen to be fair to the other jurisdictions, and the idea of this board is to give me and my department advice based on the processors and producers, as well as the environmental side and the conservation side when we're looking at sustainability. That is combined with the research that we're having done with Bangor University, which is ongoing in terms of stock assessments, etc.
So it's like a sort of barter system where you're getting information from a lot of different people with coastal waters to help yourselves, and maybe you can pass some of your knowledge and the work that the Isle of Man has undertaken with marine nature reserves.
We like to share our work, and I think from what I understand, talking to people within the industry and also on the conservation side, we are doing a lot of work that other jurisdictions aren't doing, and we're happy to share that work because I think we all need to work together. We're a small part of the Pan-Irish Sea, and the Pan-Irish Sea is where a lot of our recruitment, in other words, where the spawn for scallops comes from. So it's in everyone's interest that the whole of the Irish Sea is managed in a sustainable way, and this board, along with the Fisheries Management Agreement and various other agreements we have with other jurisdictions, enable us to do this. I believe we are one of the most open jurisdictions, and I like to think that the other jurisdictions will and do share the information and research that they carry out.
But also, while I've got you here, you've been away on I can say a business trip for government?
Well, it was indeed a business trip. I attended the Environment Ministerial meeting in Alderney for the overseas territories and Crown dependencies, and this was an environment meeting that was discussing the problems and solutions and strategies in many of the jurisdictions. In fact, I think 11 jurisdictions overall attended, and it was a very informative meeting. Ministers or ministerial equivalents attended, but it gave us an opportunity to share the information and look for common approaches where we can.
How do we compare with others with regard global warming and carbon footprints?
I'm happy to report that I came back encouraged. I was surprised at the progress that we have made and are making. We have a climate change strategy related to CO2 emissions targets, and we're signed up to most of the good stuff. The Crown dependencies in general seem to be ahead of the overseas territories, who to a certain extent rely on UK and EU funding, whereas we fund ourselves, and we also determine where we go with the policy that we have. And I think in general terms we are following best practice and well ahead of the game.
What are some of them doing different that maybe we could incorporate in the Isle of Man?
Well, we get criticism, and I understand that from lobby groups like Friends of the Earth, that we're not green enough and our CO2 emissions, well, the programme for government is realistic. They won't reduce, we will maintain them for the next 5 years because we have a gas turbine power station. Now that's 10 years old, and that seems like old technology compared to renewables. But for instance, talking to the Gibraltars, they are just about to replace oil-fired diesel generators with gas turbines, as they think that is progress. Well, it is progress for them, but for us, that seems like history.
Yeah, we've had them a while, haven't we?
We have indeed, and now the pressure is on to come up with more renewable energy. The realism that we have on the Isle of Man is that we've got a power station that we paid for, and we've got a large amount of debt hanging around that, and obviously that needs to work through its life before we start bringing in lots more green energy. But another aspect, for instance, sewage plants. I had questions in the Keys just recently about bathing water quality. Well, I was absolutely amazed to find that Gibraltar, Guernsey and Alderney
have all got Irish schemes to pump the muck from one end of the island to the other?
They haven't got any schemes at all. The muck just runs straight out to sea, long sea outfalls. Well, we still have some of those, and I'm not saying we're perfect, but at least we are committed within the programme to government within the next 5 years to cure that problem and have sewage treatment all the way around the island.
So, we're ahead of the game on that one, and it sounds like we're doing okay in the great scheme of things.
In the great scheme of things, I think we are. And in our farming strategy, where we're looking at the way we focus ADS, that's farm subsidies, and various other aspects of food production.
People moan about the subsidies for farmers, but at the end of the day, it's not wasted by the sounds of things, is it? Because it is encouraging the Isle of Man landscape to be more environmental friendly in lots of ways.
Well, it's interesting. At the meeting, we were talking about biodiversity and the way the environment or the land looks and the visual aspect. And there's no doubt about it that if you go back and look at the way the Isle of Man looks and has looked for quite a long time, it's down to the custodians of the land, and that is our farmers. And at the moment, to compete on the world stage or with the UK, an element of subsidy is required. Now, how we focus that in terms of production or environmental matters is up for discussion. But that money is circular money. When those grants go out, they generally support local businesses. And if we withdrew those subsidies, I think we would end up in a poor situation, where a lot of farmers may go out of business, and then we may end up with larger scale ranch type farming that doesn't suit the appearance or the biodiversity of the Isle of Man.
A lot of people say it's going that way at the moment.
In some respects, some farmers have, shall we say, become larger and more efficient, but I've been on the island over 30 years, and to be honest, the appearance of the island has not changed that much, although I would say that there is a lot more gorse hedging around than there used to be. But the patchwork of fields and the character of the Isle of Man is still definitively there, and that's because we've got a viable farming community. Some would say it could be more viable, but we still have cattle, sheep, and a variety of types of grazing and cropping regimes. And if you go to some of the other islands, for instance Jersey and Guernsey, you don't see the diversity that we have here. And some of the overseas territories certainly don't have that diversity. They're small islands with no real economic agricultural activity at all.
Minister for DEFA Geoffrey Boot telling me about his recent trip to the Channel Islands, and before that talking about the committee that's been set up to manage the Queen and King scallops here on the island. That was a bit of a mouthful, all them scallops together. Do you like scallops?
Not particularly, no.
And queenies and things like that?
No, I'm not a big seafood person, unfortunately.
I don't know. Seafood and eat it.
Oh, yes.
But it's nice they're all getting together, and they've got this, trying to get the sort of expertise from different waters around the Isle of Man as well. And again, that trip to the Channel Islands that Geoffrey did as well with some of the members there, to find out what they're doing around their islands that maybe we can learn from, because I suppose some of the things are very, very similar.
That's it.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, go out and get them stamps. They're absolutely beautiful there. We heard you talking to the Minister, Chief Minister Howard Quayle, and also Andrew Lees, wasn't it, that was there? And the former head gardener for Blue Peter, Chris Collins. And that good chat I had as well in the programme there. Very interesting and very enthusiastic, the Minister for DEFA, Geoffrey Boot. But that's all we've got time for this week. We'll see you the same time next week. So from me, Simon Clark.
And me, Kiri Kermode.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin, or click shaw.com. Love being Shaw. Terms and conditions apply.